Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I'm here today to do a Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about any exciting bookish things that have happened this week. And hoo boy, there have been a lot of bookish things that have gone on this week. It's kind of insane. We had the finalists for the National Book Award. I did videos reacting to both the fiction list and the translated literature list. If you haven't seen them, I'll link them down below. Joel and I did a reading wrap-up for the month of September and talked about what we are hoping to accomplish in October. That will be linked down below. These are all things that I turned around in a day. So you can tell I am like worn out at this point in the week. And yesterday, as I'm filming this, we got the winner of the 2025 Nobel Prize for Literature, Laszlo Krasznahorkai, and I turned around a video about that. So a lot has happened, and I haven't even covered the winner of the Kirkus Prize yet because I've been focused on those other things. So in this Friday Reads video, I'm going to talk about the winner of the 2025 Kirkus Prize in a moment, and then we will get into my actual Friday Reads. And if you would rather skip talking about the winner of the Kirkus Prize, I think it's a very interesting win, but you know, you do you. You can use the timestamp that I will put down below to jump to the Friday Reads. The Friday Reads is going to be interesting because with everything going on, I haven't gotten a whole lot of reading done. We'll talk about that when we really get into it, but it's interesting, and I am enjoying the two books that I am currently reading. So let's start talking about this. The Kirkus Prize, as I mentioned, was announced, and if you follow along, you know I follow Kirkus pretty closely. They do a lot of reviews of upcoming books, and part of how I track upcoming books that sound interesting is by checking the Kirkus website to see their reviews of upcoming books once a month, because once a month when there's a new issue, they post new reviews of things that are coming up. So a lot of the time, that is how I get information about things coming out that are interesting. And by looking at their reviews, it helps me, because otherwise I'm just looking at catalogs. So in reading the reviews, I get a good sense of what seems interesting. I don't always agree with their reviews, but the way they write them, I am able to tell what books sound interesting to me, might sound interesting to you, and get a sense of, like, even if something doesn't get a starred review, I might get a sense of whether or not it's something that I would like to read. So I follow Kirkus pretty closely. The Kirkus Prize is therefore of pretty significant interest to me as well, you can guess. So just as a quick reminder, let's talk about the finalists for the Kirkus Prize that was awarded this year. The finalists were The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai. Their short blurb for that was a masterpiece. The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy. The blurb is elegant and unsettling. This novel evades the expected at every turn. Isola by Allegra Goodman. Goodman's sweeping page-turner is at once historical and modern, intimate and epic, personal and powerful. A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. This electrifying depiction of dignity and morality under siege reveals the horror hidden by the bland term climate change. The Slip by Lucas Schaefer swings for the fences, makes it at least to third. Franzen, Roth, Irving comparisons earned and deserved. And finally, Flesh by David Zaloy, an emotionally acute study of manliness. Part of the reason this win is a surprise is that the winner is The Slip by Lucas Schaefer. Now, this is a literary book that at least toys with thriller conventions, and that is an interesting thing, but I think it's a genre that isn't typically recognized by literary prizes. And that's actually a good thing, I would say. I like a prize that thinks outside of the box. But I think one of the things that makes it really surprising is their description of the book. Swings for the fences, makes it at least to third. That is not the most resounding endorsement in those short blurbs, but I think this is exciting. It puts a new book into the mix because between the National Book Award and the Booker, we've heard a lot about A Guardian and a Thief, The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, and I'm glad that The Wilderness has been put into conversations, but it hasn't been making it to the end. Although it does occur to me that that might make The Wilderness a really good candidate for the Pulitzer next year, because for the past 2 years, the winner of the Pulitzer Prize has been in the mix for the National Book Award. With James, it won. And with Night Watch by Jan Ann Phillips, the only indication that that book was coming was that it was on the long list for the National Book Award. So The Wilderness could be in a really good position because it was on the long list, but it didn't make it onto the short list. It was on the list of finalists for the Kirkus Prize, but it didn't win. So it's in the mix, but it hasn't claimed any really big prizes yet. So that's interesting. But let's quickly just talk about the announcement and what they said. There is a video of the awards presentation. I admit, with everything that has gone on this week, I have not watched the announcement. But I will link the article from Kirkus down below that talks about the winners, because there is also a winner in nonfiction and a winner for children's literature. And I'm not really going to cover those here today. But that video, that link has a YouTube video embedded in it about the live event. So I will link that article down below if you want to get more information. Here is what they say about the fiction winner. Lucas Schaefer won the Fiction Prize for The Slip, his debut novel about the characters associated with an Austin, Texas boxing gym and a 16-year-old boy who goes missing. In a citation, the prize jurors wrote, quote, "This debut novel fearlessly explores issues of race, class, sex, and gender through a wildly inventive group of characters and events. Franzen/Roth/Irving comparisons are earned and deserved." So they go back to that. Now, when they announced the finalists, I did look at them, and this book sounded really interesting to me because of, especially when you get into the review, the way it talks about class, race, sex, and gender. I can't even talk at this point in the week anymore. So sex and gender, like, that sounds really interesting to me. I did put a hold on it at my library. It did become available. And I admit, I did pick it up and I chickened out. Well, I had a lot of other things I was trying to read at the time. This was like in the throes of when I was reading a bunch of books from the Booker Prize long list. So I kind of kicked the can down the road. And I admit, I was a little thrown by the Franzen Roth Irving comparisons. Not so much by Philip Roth, because I have read Philip Roth books that I have enjoyed. They were more recent ones that are sort of outside the tenure of what Philip Roth is known for as a writer. But like Indignation and Nemesis, those are Philip Roth books that I thought were really interesting and enjoyed. I DNF'd The Human Stain, and I have yet to really explore his work further than that. But I will have to, because he won a Pulitzer Prize for American Pastoral. So I'm a little iffy on Roth, but I'm interested, and I have liked things. When it comes to Jonathan Franzen, I have attempted to read 2 Jonathan Franzen books, and I have DNF'd both of them. The Corrections and Freedom are those 2 books. And John Irving, I have read 2.5 books of his. The first one was The Cider House Rules because of the film adaptation, and I didn't really enjoy the book. I thought that is a case to me where the movie is better, which is interesting because John Irving adapted The Cider House Rules for film. And one of the things that I think makes it more successful is that it eliminates an entire subplot in the book that does not serve the book, in my opinion. So it might be an interesting thing to do a book versus film comparison, but to do that, I would have to reread the book. And I don't know that I want to do that. And, you know, the book, I think, falls victim to some of the things that John Irving is interested in that I just really am not. And then I read In One Person, which I didn't think was a very successful book, but was interesting. And I attempted to read The World According to Garp because a friend of mine said it was his all-time favorite book, and the ending is one of the most meaningful things he's ever read. And I tried to stick with it because I wanted to get to the ending, but I ultimately, I just think John Irving is a writer that I don't get along with. And that's fine. You know, that's me. Other people might feel differently about John Irving. Clearly, a lot of people do. But because Lucas Schaefer is being compared to 3 authors I have a bit of a mixed history with, I admit I kind of held off. I do think I'm actually really interested in this book, though. I think what I would like to do is actually get this on audio, because when I was looking at this announcement this morning before I started filming, I thought about getting on the hold list at my local library again. And I think this is a case where I would rather do it on audio. Now, unfortunately, my library does not have access to the audiobook, so I can't get it on Libby. So if I want to do it on audio, I'm going to have to track it down. I'll probably have to like cash in a credit on Libro if I do decide that I want to do that. So to be determined, but I do think this is something that I would like to read. And if you have read the slip, I would love to hear what you have thought of it. Please let me know in the comment section down below, because again, I'm thinking that this is something that I want to read, but feedback from other people would be very helpful. So let me know. And let me know if you are interested in reading The Slip, or if you would gravitate toward any of the other books that had been finalists for the Kirkus Prize 2025. Now, with that, let's move into the actual Friday Reads portion of the video. Now, I did not actually finish a book this week, and a big part of that is that a lot of my energy this week, in addition to my full-time job, went to filming and turning around a video a day, essentially every day this week. This is the first day that I haven't had to turn around a video. Well, I'm filming a video and I will have to edit it and schedule it. So technically I am filming and turning around a video. It's just that it's going to be scheduled for the following day instead of posting immediately upon filming. So that is, it's kind of the same. So a lot of my energy has gone to that. And usually by the time I was done, I felt pretty mentally checked out. So when I would pick up my print book, I didn't really have the brain power to read very much. And when I listened to an audio, I found myself drifting a little bit. So I'd, back up the audio a little bit, pause, do something else, and then maybe come back to it later when I had a little bit more attention span. And also during free time in the early part of the week, I was looking up a lot of the people who had been in the top 20 in the odds list for the Nobel Prize for Fiction, just so I would be familiar, like at least have some familiarity with each of them. Because usually what happens is they announce the Nobel Prize for Literature. Last year, I actually had an easy time because Han Kang is somebody I've read before and I'm very familiar with. So I knew exactly what to do. But in the past, like when Jan Fosse won, I hadn't read any of his books. So I had to familiarize myself with him in order to do it. So I'm scrambling on the day of the announcement to research this person, figure out their big books, and talk about them. I actually knew Jan Fosse's big book, Septology. So that part was easy, but I still had to look a lot into who he was. So this year I wanted to give myself a head start. And one thing I will say, I really found Gerald Murnane's work interesting. I'm thinking about reading one. My library doesn't have any. That's the sort of tricky thing. But I am thinking about whether or not I would like to find one of his books and give it a try. And one thing I found interesting is that I was looking at Ken Jue, another one of the top contenders according to the odds makers. And again, never trust the odds makers for what is going to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. Yes, Laszlo Krasznahorke was high up on the list, but he was in second place. The person in number one never wins, at least not in the time that I've been following the Nobel Prize for Literature. So that's interesting. All of this to say that, my days were filled with a lot of stuff, working full time and all of this sundry stuff. And it's exciting. Don't get me wrong. Like this is all exciting. I signed up for this task of like turning around videos about the fiction list, the nonfiction list, the Nobel Prize, and all of that. I enjoy doing this, but it does mean that by the end of the week, I feel tired. And by the end of those days, I felt tired. So there's part of that. Another thing is, I guess I've also just been a little tired. So in the evening, I haven't really been reading or listening to a book. Also, Joel traveled in the early part of the week. So I actually crammed in a lot of movie watching. And I admit, I really enjoyed that. I'll tell you about the movies that I watched after we do the Friday Reads, because I've said we're doing the Friday Reads and I haven't mentioned the books that I'm reading. So I feel like people are probably getting impatient. Let's talk about those. So I had mentioned in my last Friday Reads, I believe, that I was thinking of picking up Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And I actually did a bit of a detour first. So on Saturday morning, I picked up, I actually have the book like 4 feet away from me. It's Death and Ecstasy by Nao Marsh. I did talk about it in my reading wrap up for September that I'd filmed with Joel. But anyway, I picked that book up, and I had mentioned that I have struggled with the first 3 books. I finished them. So this is a series of detective books originally published in, I can't remember if it's the 1920s or the 1930s. I'm pretty sure it's the early 1930s. And I just have not been getting along with them at all. But I thought, I have the 4th book in the series. Let me give it a try. And I hated it. I really aggressively hated it. And I think one of the big things that I struggle with in this detective series is that there's a character who is, so he's in the first book in the series, and he is sort of quickly eliminated from suspicion and becomes Broderick Allen, the main detective's sort of right-hand man during the course. Because a lot of these old classic whodunits adopt a character who's involved to be the sort of witness to everything that happens, because that way you're not in the detective's head. And I guess that sort of absolves the writer from having to give away things that the detective is thinking about, especially when Agatha Christie is writing about Hercule Poirot. He's making these logical leaps and accepting and getting rid of, in his mind, information that is superfluous or untrue. And if you're writing from the perspective of Hercule Poirot, it would be difficult to allow for that without frustrating the reader, or just, it would be incredibly difficult. So I assumed that character was just going to never appear again, but in the second book, he shows up. He's a reporter, and I don't like that character. I don't think he's very compelling. I don't think he really adds much. And in the beginning of Death and Ecstasy, he is walking down the street and sees a temple and just decides, I'm going to go in and see what this service, and they don't let him in, but he's like insistent, like, I want to go inside. And sure enough, he does kind of barge his way in and witnesses a murder. And it's kind of like, this is so convoluted and it strains credulity. So I was immediately like out. And then, so I actually skipped the last part of that chapter because I was like, let me just get to where Roderick Allen shows up and starts investigating. And I just aggressively disliked the book. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put this down. So I didn't actually get far enough into it to consider it something that I'm currently reading. So it doesn't count as a DNF for the year. I think I only made about 34 pages into the book. But I did drop it on the floor. It's the first book in 2025 that I have like thought about throwing or dropping. So I did it, and I'm gonna get rid of it. That's why it's 4 feet away from me right now, because it's on the floor thinking about what it's done in a pile of 2 other books that I am thinking of trading in. So anyway, that's where I started. So I wasted all of like Saturday morning trying to force myself to get into that book. And I think that's also a reason I haven't made a whole lot of progress in reading, because I spent my best reading time over the last week trying and failing to get into Death and Ecstasy. Now, somebody last week did comment that some of the later books in the Roderick Allen series are better. I feel so unwilling to continue. I'm on it. If I'm being honest, that I would have a hard time picking up another one. So if you have read the Nao Marsh mysteries about Detective Inspector Roderick Allen, let me know, because I am very inclined to just call it right here and stop. But is there one later on after book 4 that would be easy? Let me know, because maybe at some point I'll think about trying one of a better book in the series, but I have to be honest. I feel so disinclined to ever revisit those books again at this point that it would be a very tough sell, but I'm willing to listen. So let me know. So Sunday morning, I picked up Rebecca. We're back to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And I have been enjoying this, but I'm very much not far into it. I am 65 pages in. So I've made it far enough that I marked this as something that I'm reading on the story graph. And if I were to stop, it would qualify as a DNF. I don't like talking about a book if I haven't read any more than 50 pages, because I think if you've read 50 to 100 pages of a book, you have an informed opinion about why you didn't continue with that book. And oftentimes, if I haven't read other books in the series, like I've read the first 3 books in the Roderick Allen series, so I feel very comfortable talking about what I don't like about that series because I've read 3 books before this one that turned out to be a DNF. So that's sort of my policy about reading. I feel like I need to be far enough along that I can have a qualified opinion. So I'm at that point with Rebecca, but also have history with the movie. I love the movie adaptation, which is directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Who would Robert Hitchcock be? You can see I am just very scattered at this point in the week. And that's why I'm only at page 65 of this book. I do want to keep going. I'm sort of unexpectedly in a bit of an October mood. I'm looking for my version of sort of spooky reads because I don't enjoy I used to love horror. I didn't read very many horror books, but I used to love horror movies, and I appear to have aged out of that at where I'm at right now. So my version of spooky season is murder mysteries and sort of spooky suspense twist stories like Rebecca. And I'm really enjoying it. It does have sort of Jane Eyre vibes and a little bit of what I imagine is a sort of Wuthering Heights vibe to it, because from everything I've heard, Heathcliff is a bit of a monster and Maxim de Winter is not the nicest guy, at least not in the first 65 pages. And that makes it sort of interesting, but I'm enjoying this. So if you are unfamiliar, our protagonist is actually unnamed throughout the whole book and movie as well. She is working as a companion for this very sort of snooty and self-centered woman who falls ill while they are in Monte Carlo. And she gets to have lunch with Maxim de Winter because they sit at tables that are next to each other and they get to know each other. And she marries Maxim de Winter, who has been a widower for about a year at this point. And even in the early stages of the book, you hear references to, oh, he had such a beautiful wife, Rebecca. And so they marry. She goes to Manderley, which is his estate, and feels that she's in the shadow of Rebecca, the wife who came before her. And the servant, Mrs. Danvers, is very loyal to Rebecca. And things sort of spin out from there. So I'm at the point where they're married. She has arrived at Manderley for the first time. And this is a sort of compulsively readable book. I am hoping that over the next week, I'll have a little more bandwidth to read. So I guess that would also be a bit of a PSA. I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of videos next week. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a breather so I can recover from that. What else am I reading this week? I started The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie on audio because I just decided to sort of lean into my version of spooky reading. So if you're unfamiliar, The Murder at the Vicarage is the first Miss Jane Marple mystery written by Agatha Christie. I have always been more of a Miss Marple fan than I am Hercule Poirot. And it's interesting because in the first book, it's been a very long time since I've read any of them. So I thought starting at the beginning and then sort of working my way through the series, not immediately necessarily, but, over time. But I did just read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and that was a successful read for me. So I thought, why not just start this journey? And Miss Marple is a bit of a peripheral character, at least through the first half of the book, which is the point where I'm at right now. And it's exactly what it says. There's a murder at the vicarage. And Miss Marple happens to live next door to the vicarage. The person who's giving us the perspective is the vicar, Len Clement, who there's a lot of time in the beginning doing setup. And I think that's one of the things that works with an Agatha Christie book, because she allows time for you to sort of get to know the people and the situations, and then murder happens. So we're following him, and Miss Marple's sort of on the periphery, and the police don't necessarily take Miss Marple seriously, but Len Clement knows Miss Marple well enough to say, no, you can take her seriously if she says something. So I think that's one of the reasons I like Miss Marple. And yeah, it's fun. And I don't know, there is an audio on Libby of the next book in the Miss Marple series, so I'm kind of toying with whether or not after I finish this one, I'll go on and read another one, or if I'm going to try to get back into some other reading that I would like to do. I just have hit this little detour where I'm feeling October for some reason. So that's where I'm at. Really quickly, let's talk about the movies that I watched this week. And I watched... So Monday, I actually managed to watch 2 movies. Let me pull up my Letterboxd account, because for whatever reason, now that I'm here, I'm blanking on the second movie that I ended up watching on Monday night. So one of them was Min and Bill, which is significant because it won Marie Dressler I think it was the 4th Best Actress Oscar. It is from 1930, and it's an okay movie. She's great in it, though. She plays up comedy in it really well, but she really does get a sense of longing. So basically, she plays Min, go figure, who owns a sort of tavern, and someone left their daughter when that daughter was an infant here. So she has raised the daughter and always maintains a bit of distance where it's like, she's not my daughter. But there's clearly a maternal affection that the girl has for her and that she has for the girl. But she has to start making decisions about what Nancy, the girl's future, is going to look like, what opportunities she might have, and she has to come to the conclusion that maybe she's better off without her. So Marie Dressler really sells the sort of competing instincts that Min has, that she wants this girl to be her daughter, that she does have this motherly affection for her, that she doesn't want her to go away, but also she wants the best for her. And so it's a great performance. And I'm sort of trying to watch all of the movies that have won Best Picture. I only have 2 of those left, and I've held these to the end because of their directors, Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood and Braveheart by Mel Gibson. So at some point I will watch those. But I'm also trying to do all of the Best Actress movies, all of the Best Actor movies. I've seen a lot of the Best Actress movies at this point. I think I've seen 89%. I created a list for myself with all of the actress and actor winners. So I'm almost done with actress. And I actually also made really good progress on my Best Actor watching this week. I think I was at 84% when the week started, and now I'm at 85 or 86%. So I watched The Last Command. So the thing about really old movies is that they are short. Sometimes there are movies that won Oscars that are barely over an hour. Min and Bill is one of those. It's like an hour and 5 minutes, something like that. And I actually started watching that at about 7:30. So around 8:30, I was done. So I watched another Oscar movie, Emil Jannings in The Last Command. So Emil Jannings, at the very first Oscars, they did the acting categories a little differently. He became the first winner of Best Actor for 2 movies. He was nominated for 2 different movies. They awarded him the prize for 2 different movies. Janet Gaynor was nominated for 3 movies that she did that year, and she won for all 3 movies. Nobody won for multiple nominations again, although there were multiple nominations until they said, no, just 1 per person. So this is in that era of it. And one of Emil Jannings' films that he won for, which is called The Way of All Flesh, is lost. It doesn't exist anymore. There are no copies of it. Maybe someday they'll find a copy of it that they can release, but right now it does not exist. So The Last Command is the only performance of his that I could watch, and both Min and Bill and The Last Command are on Tubi. Tubi is not my favorite platform because of the sort of intrusive commercial breaks that it puts in, but these movies are hard to track down and watch. So I did both of them on Tubi in one night. And Emil Jannings is a very complicated person because, well, it's also interesting because that very first year of the Academy Awards is the only time silent movies were in serious contention, because that same year, The Jazz Singer, the first, talkie, came out, and it changed everything. All of the Oscar winners and major nominees going forward were talkies. So it sort of reflects that rapid shift away from silent film into talkies. And there are a lot of interesting conversations to have about that. Like Mary Pickford won the second Best Actress prize. She had been a silent movie superstar, and she really wanted to impress in her first movie where she actually talked, and she really overdid it a lot, in my opinion. So Emil Jannings could not make the transition to talkies because he had a very thick German accent. And the unfortunate thing is, when his career died because of his thick accent, he moved to Germany and became an enthusiastic supporter of the Nazis. So that's not great. It's not great at all. But I'll give him this. He's great in The Last Command. It's a really towering silent performance. And Janet Gaynor, I've seen all 3 of the movies that she won Best Actress for the same year. She is also an incredible silent movie actress. So it's interesting to watch these things. And then on Tuesday, I watched Leaving Las Vegas, which won Nicolas Cage Best Actor for the year 1995. And it's just okay. It kind of feels like a 90s TV movie in certain ways. And there is a lot of thought and work that went into his performance, but nothing ever really feels genuine to me. I kind of think a lot of the problems in that movie are more on the screenplay and director side than in the performances, but I never really connected to it. So those are the big things that I watched this week while Joel was traveling for work. So I did get a lot of that done. Although that does mean I didn't have time for reading in the evening too. So by the time I went to bed, it was like 11 o'clock and I was tired. So I went to bed. So that's what I've been reading this week. That's what I've been watching this week. That is what has gone on in the Book Prize world. Again, you can check out all the others down below. I'm going to take a break this weekend. My in-laws are coming over tomorrow. That will be fun. It'll be good to see them. So I probably won't get a whole lot of reading done on Saturday, but there's always Sunday. There's always Sunday. And then I might have a video later next week, but I think in the early part of the week, I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break and a respite from filming. I think I've earned it. That's the way it is. So I'd love to hear what you've been up to, what you've been reading, what you've been loving, what you've been watching. Have you seen any of these movies? I would be shocked if anybody has seen Min and Bill or The Last Command, because in order to watch Min and Bill or The Last Command, I feel like you have to be an Academy Awards nerd on the level that I am. And I don't know that many people are at that level. So, but if you have, I would love to hear it and what you thought of these movies. So, we also watched The Natural, which we watched that on Sunday night. Robert Redford. We've been watching some Robert Redford movies since he passed away recently. And I was not a fan of The Natural. It's a very odd story. We don't have to get into it because I'm just going to let this video end. But I wasn't a big fan. So that's what I've been up to. I'd love to hear what you've been up to. As always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.